Welcome back to Sex in Space, where we explore sex across all of its infinite dimensions. I was thrilled to be joined today by Verity Johnson, also known as Miss Vee. Verity is a newspaper columnist. She owns Club Burlesque, which is New Zealand's first burlesque club, and she also MCs for Men of Steel, which is New Zealand's only male strip club. So she's very talented, and on today's episode, I had a conversation with her about the work that she does at Club Burlesque. Let's get into it. For anyone listening who doesn't know what burlesque is, I thought we might start there if you could give us a definition about burlesque.
Yeah. So burlesque is, at its heart, a riotous celebration of femininity. It is about reclaiming the stories of the female body, and it is about celebrating and empowering yourself to really access your sexuality in a celebratory way. Historically, burlesque evolved from a few different sources. The French cabaret era of it, in like Napoleon's era, was largely about making fun of society's attitudes about sex, so it was quite closely satirical. The Americans, later on, the revival in the 50s of stripping, introduced it to being like largely striptease based, so it was like cabaret, but then it got changed into a kind of an old school stripping vibe. And that is a very separate vibe to what you now would consider a strip club. That's a different era we can get into in a minute. But then it had a kind of renaissance, definitely in the Antipodes, where they took the cabaret history, the striptease American vibe, and then they added humour. So Australia and New Zealand burlesque is a mixture of cabaret, dance, striptease, but it's often almost always funny and based around character and based around narrative. So the Antipodes brought storytelling to burlesque. So I know that's quite a journey to like, historically it's not particularly easy to explain, but it comes from a mixture of satire, stripping, cabaret, and storytelling, which has kind of been rolled up into this modern cross-discipline artistic pursuit, which at its heart is about like tease, seduction, and celebrating the beauty of eros and sensuality in real life.
Okay. And eros, for anyone who isn't familiar, could you explain what that is?
Eros is like the old Greek fancy way of saying like erotic energy. It's a very like, it makes you sound smart when you use it, but what I mean by that is like, you know, when you kind of like walk along and you're kind of crackling with the vitality of living and you see someone real cute and you have that charge of electricity when you see them and you're like, oh my god, and you make eye contact and then you kind of like just skip over all the pleasantries and you're like, that's eros.
Okay, that's a really, I like that little explanation. That's great.
That's it.
And so you own and you run Club Burlesque.
Yeah.
So maybe tell us how you kind of came to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So I started Club Burlesque because I was MCing at Men of Steel, which is New Zealand's only male strip club. I MC'd Saturdays at Men of Steel, and I said to the owner, what are you doing on Fridays? And he was like, do you have any ideas? And I was like, well, hey, do I have the idea for you? And we teamed up, and this would have been, we launched 2020, which is just ironically the first year of COVID, in that weird summer period where like everyone was like going out before we had the major lockdowns of 2021. So we launched then, which on reflection hasn't been the easiest or smoothest time to run a business. And we've done, so we did the 2020 season, we did 2021, 2022, 2023, and we're coming into this is probably our fourth proper season, because the 2021, the COVID era's got a bit weird because of all the lockdowns and stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, that's how this started.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so is it just on Fridays that it runs? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's at Las Vegas on K Road.
And so if someone wants to come along to a show, what might they expect to experience on that night?
Like the most fun you'll ever have with your girlfriends or boyfriend, because it's actually like a partner thing. So All right. Your average show is kind of like a cross between like a nightclub, an actual show, and this kind of massive bonding experience with like 200 strangers who you don't know and then become best friends with.
Cool.
It's a seated show, so it's like a proper, you're at tables, you get like drinks. It's a 2-hour kind of show experience. It's not like if you go to a strip club and it's kind of like a continual experience. This is actually like a show. And it's mostly for like either date night, so you come with your partner because you're really bored of just going out to dinner and want to try something new to spice up the relationship. Love you guys, love you. Or you come for like a hen's night, a girls' night, kind of like it's a really celebratory experience. So if you want to come and celebrate just that kind of like femininity and energy, then yeah, it's good for that. Or you'll probably come and it'll be this is my favourite type. People who are just kind of celebrating the joy of living, which is a really underrated part of our experience. We never really talk about this as a society, but there are people out there who are like, I want to feel something. That's us. We make you forget, we make you feel, we make you escape from real life into sparkly Narnia. That's what we do. We take you away to somewhere else.
Cool.
Yeah.
And is it a different story each week? Is there...
So no, we do seasonal shows.
Okay.
So we have like the winter season and then we'll have the Christmas season. But it's the same show for those seasons.
And do you find people have like misconceptions about what burlesque is or what it entails when they come along?
I think most people don't actually know what burlesque is.
Okay.
And I get that because it's got a very broad artistic reference frame. You might have seen the Pussycat Dolls live and they are technically a burlesque review, but they're burlesque in the dance burlesque way, which is largely about like massive group choreography and nothing really comes off, and it's all very sort of dance classy. Or you might have seen Dita Von Teese and thought that that was burlesque, and she is part of burlesque, but she will be classic and American.
Okay.
Or you might go to like one of those arts festival shows where like Briefs or La Soiree, which is a kind of cabaret burlesque fusion. So I think most people don't really know what it is, but at its heart, burlesque normally involves striptease, character and storytelling, and humour and satire and some kind of relationship that examines society's relationship with sex or with women's bodies or with femininity.
Okay.
Or sexuality as a whole.
And what do you find most rewarding about working in this space?
Probably the chance to redefine how we think about the erotic and the feminine and society's attitudes towards sex. Like, my burlesque, I'm not really a performer. I have done it, but I don't really dance the way the cast dances.
Okay.
I MC and I kind of do stuff, but I do it because I fell in love with the French 18th century version of burlesque from growing up in Europe. I grew up in London. And that was what I fell in love with. And that was very much about ripping the shit out of society's norms around sex. Now, for me, that's what I find rewarding. I love that. Like, we never talk about sexual ethics, sexual morals, like the way that Auckland has this culture of just like coming back here in your 30s after you've given up on life to settle into suburban mediocrity. Like, that is our vibe, and I hate that. And I want to like push against that and explore that and detonate that. And that's, to me, what burlesque lets me do.
Okay. And do you find, like, do you ever have conversations with people after they've watched the show and you can see them starting to unpack these ideas and really experience that kind of thinking?
They're always really surprised by themselves. People always have this really shallow view of human sexuality. Like, everyone, no matter what they say, like, everyone basically thinks that, like, sexual attraction is for hot, skinny bitches. Like, they think that what they want and what society wants is for, like, that kind of, like, 90s era Playboy model. They think that is the only thing that they find sexy. And then when you put seduction on stage, they find out, like, that actually what they want is far more complicated, nuanced, and different to what they thought they wanted. So most of the time people come in and they're expecting a certain thing, and they leave and they're like, oh my God, I had no idea what I wanted. And that's why we're good, is that we know there's a big difference between what people think they want and publicly talk about as a sexual culture and what they actually want and what they genuinely find attractive according to like the laws of eros or attraction. They're very separate things. So most of the time people come expecting like a really specific Christina Aguilera form of burlesque, and then they're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I find myself sexually attracted to a teapot, you know? Like, it's such a different vibe.
Yeah.
We surprise ourselves with our own depth and also our own shallowness, but yeah, mostly our own depth.
So it gets people to kind of think more about like their desire and like where that comes from and what it actually looks like.
Yeah, and the intersection of freedom with that.
Okay.
Like, there's this thing about, I was reading this book and it basically argued that the thing that women find most erotic is freedom. Like, that is the central narrative of all of our desire, freedom. And people don't really think about that, but what burlesque is on stage is the expression of freedom from societal rules about sex, social norms around sex, but also around what you think you should be as a woman. So there's a freedom in that that I think really makes people sit up, men and women, and be like, oh my God, like, the sexiest heart of what desire is actually the freedom to define it for yourself. And that's something that burlesque teaches you, that no one's ever going to sit you down and say that.
Yeah, yeah.
But we do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think is one of like the biggest or like most memorable learnings or takeaways that you've had from working in burlesque?
Do you mean on a business level or on a personal level?
On a personal level, if you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, no, far more comfortable talking about that than a business level. On a personal level, what did I take away from burlesque? My sexuality, my body or femininity or whatever, terrified me because I think from an early age I'd internalized the idea that it was a threat, that all of my bubbliness or my glamorous side or all of that it was this threat that would bring me danger in my life. And, you know, I think women like feel that for very valid reasons because we go through shit. But I also think that burlesque helped me to see that even though that femininity had brought me great pain, it also could bring me great freedom. Because obviously I can't change the fact of like how the world works or how women have spaces in society. You know, I can't change any of those narratives, but I can change how I feel about them. So it probably helped me find a sense of freedom from feeling constantly afraid of myself. But to be honest, Men of Steel was the thing that taught me that first. Men of Steel showed me that I had nothing to be afraid from my sexuality. But because that's only with women in the crowd, that was kind of like a safe way to start finding that freedom. But then with burlesque, which is a mixed crowd, there were men in the crowd, and suddenly I remembered all the reasons why I was afraid of myself. But burlesque taught me that actually you don't have to be afraid. Your sexuality is not a threat from men or women. So, yeah, it was a really revelatory experience. I probably still remember that every weekend. Yeah.
So if someone's at home listening, do you think a good place for them to start if they wanted to, you know, try something new is Men of Steel first and then Club Burlesque?
They're very separate vibes.
Okay.
Like, Men of Steel is about celebrating, reclaiming heterosexual desire for men in a safe way.
Okay.
So it's about celebrating like sex with men and finding men hot in a way that doesn't feel dangerous. That's one vibe. Burlesque is actually more about celebrating women's freedom in their bodies and themselves. Okay. So it kind of depends what you're looking for. Turns out I was looking for both. So like that's how I ended up doing it. Yeah. But I think that if you're looking for freedom from a lot of heterosexual pain, that's Men of Steel. But if you're looking for freedom from a lot of like narratives of pain of being a woman in society, that's burlesque.
And have you had any particularly like memorable experiences working with Club Burlesque? Like memorable, like positive ones?
Like really, as opposed to my own torturous journey. Yeah, we're all happy ones. Yeah, the Washington Post reviewed us. That was pretty wild.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Fucking hell. And I think the coolest part about Club Burlesque, I think, has been seeing Auckland reclaim its sexy side. The coolest thing about Club Burlesque, it's not a one moment thing, but it's when couples come up to me after the show and they say, there's nothing like this. We've never had anyone tell us that we could celebrate our desire. Because ultimately burlesque is actually also for couples, because that was partly why I started it, because I started it out of the frustration there was nothing to do on date night. And I really enjoy talking to couples who say things like, I had no idea this even existed. It's not slutty. It's not that slutty is a bad word, but you know what I mean. It's not tacky or dangerous. It's actually really fun. And I think seeing couples realise for the first time that you can celebrate attraction and femininity and masculinity and sexuality and desire in a way that isn't negative is really eye-opening for a lot of people. And I like that. Auckland doesn't have a space to celebrate that. Auckland's terrified of talking about sex and sexuality. New Zealand as a whole is terrified of it. So having couples be like, oh my God, I found our eros and our attraction for the very first time reflected back to me, and I wasn't made to feel ashamed for it. That's cool. It's very cool.
And like kind of leading on from that idea of like not having those spaces to explore that, do you think, and this is, I mean, it's fine if you don't have an answer for this too, are there ways that we can kind of work to create those spaces like elsewhere as well, so it's not just one place that, you know, is doing all of the work single-handedly?
How do you deconstruct shame in society?
Yeah.
In theory.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be more funding and support for the arts in a cultural context, and the recognition that people do go out and spend money on these shows from the government or from even just the general society. We're not a particularly pro-art country. If we just were a little bit more like honest about the fact that we spend money on art, we would be able to like fund spaces that discuss these ideas publicly, but we don't, because we're just like, oh, it's just art, so like no one goes to it, which is a really stupid way of approaching these discussions.
Yeah. Especially because, I mean, like you're saying, people get so much out of it.
Yeah.
And if people are coming up to you constantly and saying, you know, this is what I got from it and thank you. And,
yeah.
You know,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
But no, people really struggle with the idea that that this could make money or be a tourist attraction. It's really stupid though, because like Paris has built like a reputation of globally being the home of burlesque since like the mid 1700s. And I feel like if the French have been doing it for 400 years, 300 years, then like it's possible, team.
Yeah.
But
and so anyone who is interested in coming along to a burlesque show, where can they find more information about that?
So it is just clubburlesque.co.nz, and we are Friday nights. Yeah, just Google it. Come find us.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And just before we finish, is there anything that you would like to share, anything that you wish I'd asked that you'd like to share your thoughts on, whether that be Men of Steel or Club Burlesque?
I think people are really worried in society about whether they're allowed to enjoy sex, desire, reclamation of the erotic story. And I would just be like, don't fucking worry about it. Honestly, you're allowed. You have permission. Don't sit there and stress out that if you have fun with your life and with your relationship, that somehow it makes you unclean or unworthy. Like, it's in your head. And I get it, because I used to do that. But that's not a thing. And ignore all of the societal messaging that says that it is. Like, whatever. Fuck them. Yeah.
like that's a good place to wrap it up, I think.
Cool.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Not at all.
And for sharing your experiences and your insight. And again, to anyone listening, we'll put all of the information and the links in the description so you can go and check out Minister and Club Burlesque.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Before we sign off, we wanted to ask you for your help. Because we talk about sex, we keep getting shadow banned across a lot of social media platforms. And this not only makes it hard for us to be found, but it says that sex is not okay to talk about. Not only is sex okay to talk about, it's totally essential because more knowledge equals better outcomes across a whole bunch of measures for all of us. You can make a difference, and the thing that we need from you is your active support. So please follow the podcast and sign up to our socials, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whichever you like. You can find us over on sexandspace.com and click on our social links from there. Help us make sex an okay space. Thank you for taking this Sex and Space trip with us. Until next time, safe travels, and we'll see you on the next intergalactic episode.